So, good morning everybody and welcome to today's Planning Development Control meeting of Winchester City Council. A few introductions. First of all, the councillors are sitting on either side of the table with their names, and then the case officer and the first case officer is Hannah Harrison, always sits there, and we have Judy Pinnock, who's the service lead for built environment, and Fiona Sutherland, who's looking to see what our labels are. She's a public law manager. These titles change. A reminder to members of the public to turn their mobile phones off or put them on silent, and that we shall be recording this session. It's being live streamed as we speak, and also visually recording it, and that will be on the City Council's YouTube after the meeting. The first item, we have to appoint a vice chair for the meeting because the appointed vice chair for the year, Councillor Jane Rutter, is not here today. I'd like to nominate Councillor Brian Lamy. Is that agreed? Thank you. And then we move on to the agenda. Apologies, Deputy Member.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence received from Councillor Rutter, with Councillor Weir deputising. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I forgot to introduce Claire Buchanan, who's acting as the committee clerk and supported by Maggie Watson. Disclosures of interests. Normally we now do that actually at the application. Does anyone want to say anything there? Then we all have the update sheet. Could we accept that as an addendum to the report? Great. Thank you. No minutes today because we've already agreed minutes. We haven't seen them anyway. So we move straight on to the planning applications. The first planning application is agenda item 5, which is SDNP. Southbound National Park /2102821/FUL. Before that, I ought to just tell you about the fire evacuation procedure. We're not expecting any practice today, so if you hear the fire alarm, please put your mask on and leave your nearest fire exit, which will probably be that one there. Unless there's a fire somewhere there, and then you'll be directed out, and the assembly point is Abbey Gardens. So back to the first application. This is a part retrospective planning permission for the change of use of land from agricultural to equestrian and the erection of a private recreational 3-door stable to be used in association with the dwelling house of Hayden Barn Cottage. The case officer is Hannah Harrison, and when you're ready, Hannah, please give us your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Today I present to you application Hayden Barn Cottage at Hayden Lane. Here we have the location plan and land ownership. We'll now go through my site photos. Placed a small map on the bottom of each presentation slide so you can see where the stable is located and the location of the camera. The first photograph is views from Hayden Lane. Again from Hayden Lane, but a bit further up the road. This small circle indicates the current location of the stable, and you can see it slightly through the hedging. Views from the hayloft driveway entrance. Again, the circle indicating the current location of the stable. Same location, slightly different angle. Photo taken from the public right of way, again, slight views of the stables. Photo taken from the entrance of the woodland within the land ownership of the applicant. Views taken from the entrance of the paddock. Views from the proposed location of the paddock. Photo taken from the swimming pool area of the hayloft. This line here indicates the hedging that was at the time cut down by the local overline maintenance. Slightly further into the hayloft's garden. Again, views are obviously very clear of the stables. Again, views from the hayloft's land ownership. This is facing into the paddock. And the plans of the stables. These images show the different landscape heights within the stables and around them. These plans show the existing level plans of where the stables currently sit. And these are the proposed level plans. These are the stables in question. And the proposed block plan of the site once complete. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we move now on to the public speaking. And the first speakers are objectors, Jackie Ware and Simon King. Are you both here today?
Yes.
And you have 3 minutes in total to speak. One of you can speak, or you can share the 3 minutes.
No, I'm just going to speak. It's just on you.
If you wish to, yeah. But you can speak from where you're sitting, but
Yeah.
that's fine, that's fine.
I've spoken on the microphone before, so it's easy to see.
So you're speaking, Ms. Ware?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're speaking and if Mr. Pink,
No, he won't.
okay.
Yeah, we're not quite ready. We're just going to get some slides up that the speaker wanted to show.
All right, okay. Bear with us a minute.
can't do that. I can't.
Sat out the window.
What one? This one.
To the right.
This one. I don't know.
I'll finish what I was saying. You have 3 minutes to speak, and at the end of 3 minutes, I will ask you to stop speaking. Hopefully, you will have stopped by then.
Of course. Could I just say though, with regard to the slides, I've actually changed my wording in my speech since a couple of days ago because Hannah visited our property and I gave her some further information which included some of the pictures which she said that she put into the update sheet, but they're not actually in there. So although the pictures are available, they're not included in my speech.
Right.
I think Councillor Lumbey will refer to them, but
Okay, so someone's going to speak about them.
yeah, I'm just unsure why they weren't in the update sheet, but
Generally, we don't append things in full to the update sheet, we refer to them and they've been put on the file. As part of the public file, this was what was submitted to us to share during.
okay, it's just that they weren't on the website last month either, but anyway, that's
And you say that Councillor Lumley is going to
yes,
cover it anyway?
yes, he'll refer to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you're ready, when you start speaking, your 3 minutes will start, and that will come up on the screen there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Right, this is an emotional plea to urge you to vote against this application for the second time. We were extremely shocked when the applicant reapplied for what is essentially the same application following its refusal from both committee and appeal. We've had to endure this for over 2 years and it's very depressing. Following the visit of the previous committee members, concerns were raised regarding flooding. Unfortunately, they were correct, as the unauthorised engineering works have caused structural damage to our swimming pool wall. We are very concerned that the runoff from horse waste, which will be situated on a steep slope directly above our pond, will pollute it and kill the fish and wildlife. Not knowing if we are able to continue our conservation work with Birds of Prey Hospital is very distressing. Why does the planning officer ignore the 4 letters provided by the Birds of Prey expert? Her opinions regarding this are questionable. Be clear that human intervention required for stable forces 8 metres from our main aviary will cease our works. We have undertaken our conservation work for 14 years, not recently, as suggested by the planning officer in her case to the appeal. We have concerns regarding the horse waste in relation to the borehole we have been advised to have installed. This is against DEFRA guidelines who clearly state horse waste cannot be stored nor the washing out of stables within 50 metres of a borehole. The planning officer has failed to address this, as she has with many other issues, just one example being disregarding the advice of all equestrian experts. Having owned and bred Arabian horses all of my life, including 2 world champions, I can speak from experience in saying the keeping of horses comes with issues, some of which the applicant is moving as far away from their house onto our boundary as possible. This includes the need for lighting. We strongly believe this part of the national park should remain as agricultural to stop a precedent being set whereby farmers sell off small parcels of land for pony paddocks, which can become cluttered with horse paraphernalia. As far as we're aware, the only person who has recommended approval of the stables on our boundary is the planning officer, despite a far more sensible location being identified by previous committee members. The meadow is still not large enough for more than 1 horse, let alone 3. There have been 87 objections to this series of applications. Other serious points ignored by the planning officer include ecology, topography, loss of trees, overhead electrical line, engineering works. To conclude, we would urge you once again to turn down this application. Should it be appealed again, we would hope that the planning officer submits a more robust response than her previous one, which contains misinformation, which I hope you have all seen. We feel that continual errors made by her would give us a strong case for a judicial review should this be passed. Our last resort will be to implement the restricted covenant we hold regarding the land. Thank you for listening, and I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Don't go, because there might be questions from
Yes.
Councillor. And I just wondered, officers, if we could do something about the timer, which for us is back to the future.
Yeah.
Any questions from councillors? Councillor's up.
Chair, could you explain to me the restrictive covenant you have on the land?
Yes, when we purchased our property, we had a restricted covenant for about 4 acres of the land, which is to retain it as agricultural land. So we had a look at the deeds for the piece of land in question, the 3/4 of an acre, because we did feel that that might have a similar restriction. It doesn't have a covenant for agriculture, but it does have a covenant which says that they're not allowed to do anything to disrupt, disturb or annoy the neighbours of the retained land, which is us. And that covenant was put into place by Brocklands Farm, who sold both pieces of land. And we've since had a meeting with the owners of Brocklands Farm who confirm that this is the understanding of the covenant. And our solicitors have written to the applicant regarding this. I mean, obviously it's very expensive to take out a court injunction and implement it, but if all else fails, that's what we'll have to do.
Thank you.
Chair, if you want me to address it now, I can just advise the committee that a restricted covenant is a private matter, it's not a planning matter, and it isn't something that could be a reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laney?
Yeah, since you've had an experience with horses over a number of years, what do you consider to be the average for one horse?
Well, if you've read our objection, there's an appendix in there, which is a report from an equestrian expert, and all of the figures are in there. I mean, the land is only actually big enough for one horse, and that's borne out not just by the equestrian expert, but by the British Horse Society. You can Google it. It's a known fact that the land is just not big enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. So could I ask you about the structure where you look after injured birds? It's not
Yes.
just an owl sanctuary, is it?
No, we work with the Birds of Prey Hospital. To date, we've only had owls, but anything they send to us, obviously we would take and hope to rehabilitate and release once,
And this application has a new position for the proposed stables.
Yes.
Is that further away?
No, it's directly behind the owl lavery, 8 metres, and a lot of people keep saying, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, Hannah's comment was, it's usual for barn owls to fly over horse fields, etc., which is obviously the case, but it's a human intervention. So stabled horses require attention at least 3 times a day. Lighting, although you say there'll be policing of the lights, the structural lights, people coming and going, cars, car lights, torches, noises, etc. It would just be untenable to continue as per 4 letters that the Birds of Prey Hospital have sent in each objection.
So are these proposed stables nearer than the current?
Yes,
stables?
much nearer, probably 50, 70 metres nearer.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Bento?
Thank you very much. I saw the pictures going through, but there's no description of exactly where they were. So would it be possible to look at the pictures again with a brief description of where they are and where they're taken from, please?
Yeah, I think the whole point of this, and I know that Councillor Lumby is going to refer to it in his speech, is because the stables were built without planning permission originally, and then it was agreed by everybody that positioning was totally unacceptable. A lot of the work had been done. So going back even further from that, when the original house was made 48% larger in size back in 2018, all of the chalk spoil from the footings was dispersed across the whole of the land. So the land has been raised substantially across the whole levels, not just around the stables. Around the stables it's around 5 feet, as you can see in the picture, which is what's caused the flooding onto our land. But probably 3/4 of the land has been raised in height. So the first picture was a picture that the original owner, Mrs. Millington, sent that the field actually looked like at the time that she sold the land. Then we're showing what the field looked like when the planning inspector from the appeal would see. So, but it wasn't sort of described to her to look against the original land as opposed to what's there now. So it looks as if, you know, so much work hadn't been done. You can see by the trees, you know, the tree roots just disappeared because the land is so high.
Okay, Councillor, and I have asked the case officer to indicate eventually where the sanctuary is in relation to the new stables. So is that it for questions from Ms. Ware?
Chairman, just a request, the photographs that were supplied by the director, is it possible they could be enlarged so people can actually see them more clearly?
I think the case officer said she can.
That's how it is now, and that's what the planning inspectorate would have seen at the appeal. And then the other picture shows what it was like before any works, no, not that, before any works took place. No, not that one either. My eyesight's not very good, but yes, that's what the paddock looked, the meadow looked like before any works took place.
So it does relate to a question. It's a little while ago since I went out to visit, as you know, the members of the committee went out and found it very beneficial to do so. Is the track leading down a compacted, or is it other concrete nature?
I think that's a question. I think that's a question which Hannah will answer in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
So that being the end of questions, thank you very much. It would be useful if you felt you could stay where you are, but do return, because otherwise we have to re-sanitize your area. So you may move if you're more comfortable.
Okay.
So this where please go back to where you were originally. Sorry, it's just different time. And we've now got the Parish Council representative, Councillor Mark Rogers. Are you going to speak from there? Yeah.
Yes,
So you have 3 minutes.
I have
to go to the procedure. So when you start speaking, is it possible to get the timer on the screen?
Yes, as soon as he starts. Yeah.
Oh.
So when you're ready, and when you start speaking, the timer will start.
Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, thank you all for the opportunity to address the committee today for the second time. My name is Mark Rogers. I am addressing you as the Chairman of Woodland Parish meeting, in which the applicant's house is located, but not the paddock where the stable is. However, our adjoining parish, West Neon, is fully aware of this application and object. They cannot be here today to express their views. We also see in your correspondence that not one of the people that took the time to comment on your portal supported the application. Our planning procedure within our parish requests that residents either make direct comment to you or suggest that I comment on their behalf. I'm doing this now, so the number will be much higher. The new application moves a previously built stable to the northwest corner. However, for the reasons below, the parish of Warnford and West Leon still objects to the application. Firstly, it is not disputed that paddock falls below the British Horse Society's recommended size for 2 horses, let alone 3 horses. However, this application seeks to change the use to a question and construct a 3-horse stable. Why? We don't understand. Furthermore, the stable has no facilities for horse tack, saddles and fodder. Our concern is that this will lead to a later application for further buildings. An additional concern is that there is also no mention of the measures to dispose of manure and other waste. Point 2, given the unauthorised changes to land levels when the existing stable was erected without planning permission, there is concern that there may also be unacceptable change to land levels if the stable is relocated. The letter and supporting photo from the original resident, dated August 17th, brought home to my parish the extensive groundworks already undertaken in putting up the stable in its current location. The applicant has already damaged a large area of meadow, and the proposed site will involve damaging more. We do also question why after 2 years, no attempt to remove it has been made to or reinstate the raised ground of which it is sitting. Concern levels over the high level electrical cables which run very close to the proposed relocated stadium have not been addressed. We also feel that the conclusions reached regarding the impact on the hours for Avery are wrong and misleading and should be not be disregarded when evidence has been provided to the contrary by a professional. In conclusion, the parish of Warnford still objects to this application and suggests that great weight should be given to conserving our national parks landscape and scenic beauty when reinstating the damage already done. We also kindly remind you of the overwhelming objections to the application. Many thanks for taking the time to listen to me again, and that's Mark Rogers, Chairman of Warnford Parish Meeting.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions for Councillor Rogers? Councillor Pearson?
If I may, Chairman, you may be the wrong person to ask this question, Mark, but normally if soil is going to be moved from one site to another, there's a DEFRA licence. Do you know whether a DEFRA licence was applied for and or granted?
I probably am the wrong person to ask that question.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Finished?
Yeah, it's, as I thought, Mr. Rogers was not the right person to ask the question. And perhaps here he says.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Any further questions? No, thank you very much, Councillor Rogers. Thank you. And now we have our ward councillor, Councillor Hugh Lumley. Well, you'll need to sit at one that, not the middle one, because that needs to be re-sanitised according to our instructions.
Oh gosh, okay. Strange world it is.
And then when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Just before we start, thank you for getting us on first today, because I know I have to run away. Oh yeah, sorry.
Can you put your mic? Yeah.
Thank you. Just say, as you know, I have to run from this at some point. So please extend my apologies if I sneak out before the end, because I have to be. I hope that's okay if I can just quietly sneak out.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, so I have to.
Could you put the microphone down?
Oh.
Yeah.
Was it some tunes?
Just say it again quickly.
Chair, I had to be somewhere else this morning, as you know, and I just wanted to say before I started, if this goes on for some time, I may have to sneak out. So apologies if I go out.
When you're ready.
Is it still working?
Get going. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. It is the third time I've addressed the committee on this proposed development. Thank you to everyone who has endured me before and to all those members who like this time or previously. I am saddened by this report, which seems to me to be full of errors and to ignore many important points. Indeed, an example can be found in the first paragraph, where it says the application is here today in part at the request of the Parish Council appended to the report. You will see this on page 26 under the heading Parish Council request for committee referral, and what you see there is in fact my request. It's not important for the decision, but it shows the approach taken. Likewise, the fact that the representations received don't appear to have been put up on the committee, at least, or on the file, at least last night. I'm afraid the same approach was taken to the appeal, where the council did not, in my view, set out the reasons for a refusal fully for the inspector. I understand this may have been due to some internal issues, but by not putting our best foot forward, there was a reasonable view that this affected the ultimate outcome. There were some really important points here that were brushed off then, and which I feel have been brushed over here. First, there is this whole issue of land levels. The comparison before the committee today is not between the position as it is currently and what it might have been. It's before the large-scale unauthorised raising of the field took place and what is now proposed. And I do feel the report just gets that emphasis wrong. Mrs. Millington, in her letter, which is referred to in the update refers to the ability to talk over the hedge before those works were done, and a photograph was which we've seen in Jackie's presentation shows what it was like before. Let's not send a message from this committee today that it's fine to desecrate the countryside if you put some nice flowers on it afterwards. It is this increase which causes the concern about flooding and drainage, very material considerations which I submit were not properly explained to the inspector or explored in this report. SD 24D makes it clear that question development should locate new buildings, stables, yard areas and facilities adjacent to existing buildings, provided they respect the amenities and activities of surrounding properties and uses. As I've said before, it's hard to think of a location further away from the applicant's existing buildings. Indeed, when I cycled past the site yesterday, already no photographs of that, I noticed what appeared to be a nice new shed right behind the applicant's house. Interesting that if there is no issue with smell or light, they didn't put the stable there. And note the reference in SD 24D to not interfering with the activities of surrounding properties. We've heard about the impact on the owls, which have been going on there for 14 years. The size issue for the change of use is critical here. The field is suitable only for a single horse. You will have seen in the papers clever people who understand about horses explaining the dangers of overgrazing and the fact that it's bad for the field and bad for the horses. SD 24A makes it clear that any development should be of a scale and an intensity of equestrian use compatible with the landscape and the special qualities. This clearly isn't. A 3-horse stable is clearly wrong for a 1-horse field, and furthermore it's contrary to SD 24G, which requires any development to demonstrate a conservation-based land management approach. 1 horse isn't even a condition. The report failed to analyse this properly, and a rejection on this ground is clearly consistent with the appeal decision and the local plan. Even more importantly, rejection is necessary to protect this already vandalised field and to protect any horses on it. A final point I want to mention with waste management. As I said in my referral to the application committee, the application does not explain where this is to be stored, how this is to be moved and the frequency of this. I'm worried about smell and contamination. The fact that the DEFRA guidance makes proposals which have not been incorporated is a concern. Even more so with the issue of contamination from runoff and nitrates entering the aquifer feeding the River Meon. Basically, all water flows into the aquifer and into the river. And we're talking about serious quantities. 1 horse and 1 pony between them are estimated to produce about 11.25 tonnes of manure a year. And that excludes soil, straw and the like. Where is this all to go? A real concern if you live right beside it, as the neighbours do. Perhaps less of a worry if you position your stable as far away from your house as possible. Yes, there is a condition about this, but what confidence can there be that this will be adhered to, given the track record of disregard for the planning rules here? Thank you for your time today. Please do put people and nature first before unauthorised and works and unnecessary horse accommodation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Lumby? Councillor Refusal.
Thank you, Chair. You said in your speech report missing many points.
Yes, so when the appeal report was submitted, it was missing a lot of stuff, important arguments about the levels, about the impact. Generally, it missed off about half of the stuff, I reckon. I raised it with a senior officer, and the senior officer expressed surprise because that officer told me that the officer had informed the writer that these things should be added to the report. That officer then went back and checked the report and found that they had all been omitted. So unfortunately, it seems that for whatever reason, the requests for important matters that should have been drawn to the inspector's attention were omitted, and therefore we didn't put our best foot forward for the inspector, which perhaps explained why the inspector just focused on one issue here.
Any Councillor Weir?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lumby, for your comments. You've made quite a lot about the impact of this on the water aquifer. Can you inform us about a policy that we might be looking at that might help us to address the issues around the aquifer question? Thank you.
I'm afraid at this point, I'm afraid my knowledge of the report is not that I can have a nowhere say, but I'm sure there is important stuff in the local plan about protecting the water. It's actually really interesting because this was in relation to a different application recently, which the South Downs themselves called in for consideration. When you look at the whole area, whilst you have the source of the River Meon slightly further up in the valley, in fact, what happens is this whole area is effectively a series of water flowing down the hill into the river. And in fact, the sort of main starting point is very much at the bottom of the hill, and you turn right up towards West Meon. And that's really where the water really flows down to. So we are talking here, and it's not like it's just streams or a spring. The whole area is like a massive sort of, sponge is the wrong word. It's like a photograph of a very old person with all their veins. Sorry, I don't know how to say by those terms, but lots of endless lines going down with all the water flowing down. And I do know that the South Downs take the protection of the water extremely seriously from that white wool application. And also the issue clearly of nitrates going into it. So I'm afraid I didn't answer your question. So apologies, Councillor.
Thank you. Any further questions for Councillor Lumbie? No? So thank you very much for coming along today. Final public speaker is the agent, Mr. Dan Roycroft. Be happy to speak there, Mr.
Yes,
Roycroft? Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
So we have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors, chair. My name is Dan Roycroft. I'm a chartered town planner and the agent for the application. So you will have heard the application was before you in summer last year, where it was refused on the basis of impact on the character and appearance of the national park. The applicant appealed this decision, and an appeal decision was issued in May this year. Whilst the appeal was dismissed, this was purely on the basis that the inspector considered a change of use of the paddock from agricultural to equestrian should have been included within the description of development. In terms of impact upon the character and appearance of the national park, the inspector stated, I quote, "Overall, the modestly scaled building is typical of its intended function and does not appear disproportionately large relative to the paddock or out of context with the landscape, given the proximity of domestic buildings nearby. The stable block would be more discreet in the landscape once relocated, owing to the landform and features, such as trees, including those to be planted. The track would also be more sensitively scaled, surfaced, and less impactful. For the above reasons, the proposal would not have a harmful impact upon the harmful effect on the character or appearance of the area, and would preserve the natural beauty of the wider national park." At appeal, the same objector's evidence that you've heard today was submitted, and in terms of impact upon neighbouring community and highways, the inspector further commented, "The suggestion that the neighbours' efforts to rehabilitate birds would be affected by the proposal does not appear to be borne out by the evidence. Similarly, a material increase in the number of horse boxes on public roads in the area is unlikely to be solely related to the proposal given its modest scale. Subject to conditions, I do not consider that the noises, smells or intensity of use of such modest stable block would give rise to a materially harmful impact to the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers." Given that the inspector has clearly ruled on these aspects of the proposal and no changes in this regard are proposed on the plans in front of you, all that's left to consider is the change of use of land to equestrian. As assessed within the officer's report, views of horses grazing in the paddock would not be out of keeping with this countryside location and would not impact upon the scenic beauty of the national park. Indeed, this has been the LPA's view on several other applications for similar changes of use that we reference in our planning statement. In terms of conditions, we agree that the use should be conditioned to the personal use of the applicants. We have also suggested a condition related to a restriction on field boundaries, subdivisions, movable structures, field shelters and horse jumps, but no, this is not included within the suggested condition list in the officer report, but we would be happy for it to be so. I'll just, 10 seconds, okay, size of land. That report is in terms of it not being large enough without supplementary feeding. Supplementary feeding is proposed. The third stable is to be used as a tack room and feeding area.
If you could just
Sure.
include
Last
your
final
final
point that might address some questions is just the levels. There are section drawings submitted with the application that show what's there as existing and what's proposed in terms of putting the levels back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions for the agent? Councillor Reid.
Would this be the point to ask about the track and its composition, please?
So, sorry, I'm just, I can't see. Yeah, so the track at the moment is it's just a sort of compacted hardcore base. As proposed, it's to be sort of your standard farm track with the green grass verge in the middle, and there's a picture in one of the inset picture in one of the pictures that the officer has. So gravel in the side and a grass centre. It's not a concrete based track though.
Could I ask the thickness of the composition?
Not something that I'm particularly aware of. It's something that I'm sure could be conditioned if you felt it was important that the specific makeup of that track was approved, and that could be conditioned. We could submit section drawings from the contractor to show exactly how that would be built.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearson.
Now, you heard me refer earlier on to DEFRA licence about movement of material. Now, we've heard that when the house was originally built.
Could you talk into the microphone? I know you like to look at people, but it's being recorded.
I understand the reason you're saying that, Chairman. It's difficult to speak to somebody sitting behind me. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Actually, it's not. Right, okay. We're talking about the landfill. That is the material that's moved from the site of the house onto the field to do the levelling. Normally, when material is moved in that way, there's a DEFRA licence. I have a couple of other questions as well. What sort of DEFRA licence applied to for the movement of that material?
So I'm not aware that the material was absolutely moved from the house site to the field. It's something that I don't know the answer to that either way. My understanding of the licensing though is if it is remaining on what is essentially the same site, that the license wouldn't be required.
Right. Yeah, well, that's not for me to decide. I mean, that's opinion and my opinion. Linked with that, when you move material from one site to another and put it on another, then there's issues about drainage. It takes a while for the drainage pattern to settle down. Now, this is a sloping site. It's still a sloping site, even with the landfill in place. It's quite clearly relatively recent movement because when we were there in August 20th of last year on the site visits, we walked across the paddock and there are lots of flint within the grass, or the grass was within the flint. Basically, there was no turf as such as you would normally have on downland, which A, makes it difficult for horses grazing, and B, indicates there is issues with drainage. In other words, you wouldn't get so much going into the soil, you get more moving down the slope, close to the surface, into, granted, the drainage ditch that's along there. So the question is, where does that water go, and how much effluent, liquid effluent, is likely to be coming from the stables in that process?
So in terms of where the water goes, the site remains a greenfield site. At the moment, it will drain through infiltration into the ground. That would remain the case. The surfacing of the track will of course need to be permeable, or at least constructed in a way that angles any runoff back into the field rather into neighbouring land. And the stables will be built for soak away, so anything that's caught on the roof, which would then be the only bit of hard impermeable surface on the site, would go to a soak away and again infiltrate into the land.
So the soakaway presumably would go down to the soil into the aquifer, which then would go down the hill into the river. Is that what you're saying?
I guess eventually it will all infiltrate down to the river. Yeah, absolutely.
There would be a degree of purification in the process. I do accept that, but that water is eventually going to land up either evaporating, which makes what is left more toxic, but the rest is going to go downhill to the river below and out to nitrates in that river. Would you agree with that comment?
I guess eventually it's all going to go to the river, councillor. Yeah, in terms of the level of nitrates that might be put onto the land, given this is already a agricultural piece of land and there could be grazing of animals. I think that if you're to look at the Natural England guidance on kind of land uses and what changes in uses are likely to impact on the nitrates in the river, this type of application wouldn't fall within that guidance, and that would be why your officers haven't been required to submit an appropriate assessment to Natural England.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Could I ask about the track?
We'll take them out.
All, I think, with the exception of one town, I'm not sure, have been to the site in two tranches. So one for the last application, and then new councillors to the committee today have also been with the case officer. And when we were there for the second application, we all expressed a question as to why the stables weren't put at the entrance to that field, which would avoid having a track at all. And now with this application, I would be interested in the answer to that. And now with this application, the track is being extended round to another side of the field.
In terms of why the stable wasn't put there originally, I can't particularly answer that question because we've been instructed at the point where it's already been put in a spot on the site. In terms of why it hasn't been put there now, that's certainly been considered, but because of the way the land runs, that part of the site actually forms a high point in the site, and we've got a topographic survey that was submitted that shows that. So it would be a more prominent position within the paddock than what's proposed at the moment. The position where it is currently was one that we've had detailed discussions with your landscape officer, who has agreed that it is the most appropriate spot in landscape terms and in terms of protecting the national park. And it's a position that the planning inspector has raised no issue with, and as I've quoted, commented on the fact that the levels and the landform mean it is the most appropriate place for the stables to sit.
I see, thank you. We do have a copy of the appeal decision, the inspector's report. Councillor Laming.
We noticed that when we went on the visit, that the land has been raised quite substantially on the border with the next door property. Now, how has that land been stabilised? Because we hear that there is possible damage to the wall around the swimming pool. Obviously, there's an additional weight pushing down the hill.
I don't think the suggestion of damage to the swimming pool, and it's not something that I'm an expert on or can comment on, and I don't believe there's been any expert reports on. I don't believe the suggestion, Councillor Laming, is that's from additional weight of the land. It's the suggestion is that it's runoff that's running down that steeper area of slope that's being constructed, and I think it's clear there's been some in whether it happened prior or when the stables were put in that position they are currently, there's clearly been some level of intervention in the land there to create at least that level platform for the stable to sit on. I think probably the important drawing for you to look at would be the existing and proposed section drawings that have been submitted and would be conditioned as any part of the approval, which do show existing levels and what's proposed in terms of that slope being pulled back and reduced. So as part of the proposal, if it were approved, that would be rectified, that would be removed.
Yes, but when you stand there at the back of the stables, looking up at them from the headline, there is quite a substantial increase in the amount of land that's been put there.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree with you. I think probably what it is the cut that's been taken to form a level platform for the stable has been pushed behind and builds that slope. I don't at all disagree with you that's the case. The section drawings that have been submitted are based on a topographic survey of the site, so we know exactly what those levels are to the millimetre, and they're based on that land being reduced back and put back to a much more gradual slope to the boundary.
Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rycroft. In belated submission, you've said that waste will be removed in a contained trailer on a regular basis and taken away from the site by a local contractor. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? What sort of contained trailer is proposed? How often will waste be removed? Will it be removed direct from the stables into the contained trailer or stored on site? And how will effluent runoff, both from the stables and from any other storage of waste, be controlled? Thank you.
So in terms of the waste removal, as you've already said, the details that have been provided are that it would go to a contained trailer. Exactly how, where and when is covered by one of the suggested conditions to be as per the local authority's approval prior to the use commencing.
Could I just expand on that, Councillor Weir's question? You must have, or the applicant must have some idea of the regularity of collection or storage.
I'm sure they do, Chair. It's not a question that has been specifically asked of me by officers because it's been something they've been comfortable could be covered by a condition, and obviously the planning inspector was also happy that aspect could have been covered by a condition.
With respect, we are asking you, and because it is a matter of concern for local residents, but if you don't know the answer, then okay. Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Chair. With conditions on storage, I think we should have got a condition in, and would you be happy with that condition, that we specify where the storage should be at the top of the field, near the gate, and it should be collected at a regular interval, which is set by the planning officer. This is quite normal practice in some areas.
I'm sure
the applicant would be completely happy with a condition wording such as that. I think the condition may already include a similar wording, but yes.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the level plan proposed, in front of the stables themselves, you've got an apron. What is the surface of that apron going to be if you're mucking out? Is there going to be a hard surface or is it just a compacted surface?
I don't know if the officers can read the annotation on the plan from there at all. I just can't quite see it from here.
I think I'll read it online, so that's why I'm asking the question.
suitable. It's very frustrating.
It would need to be obviously some kind of hard surface, but I'm sure could be a permeable and could be conditioned as it must be a permeable.
I presume it's the same as what's there now, is it? With the current stables.
I don't think so necessarily. I think what's there now, we don't particularly think is an acceptable finish. It's quite a hard finish. So no, I don't think so. It would need to be a permeable surface. It would need to be a hard surface. But I don't think it would be like what's there now. I don't think that's particularly acceptable as a finish. It's quite coarse.
Do we have an answer? No.
I don't think we can read it, but I think, I think the agent's indicated the conditions be acceptable, so I think we could condition that if you were otherwise minded to approve it and get that up afterwards.
So the condition would be?
We would ask the details of that surface treatment.
Right, says Chairman, on page 19, the second paragraph down, deals with the track and the gravel apron outside the new site stadium.
But I don't think it covers the point that we
The corner surface, as the agent says, hard standing firm gravel placed in front of the building, so plan has, so if I may quote that.
Well, I'll ask the committee in a minute whether they are going to approve with an extra condition on that matter. I did have a question. I know what it was. There's been lots of comments about 3 stables in relation to the size of the field. So are all 3 stables intended to be used by horses at the same time?
No, so the applicant has 2 horses which are intended to be stabled there, and the third stable sort of area is to be used for kind of tack and feed and storage.
I see, but it's still a stable, isn't it? It's not, it's got the appearance of a stable.
It does, but the alternative would be that there's a separate building or structure for tack and feed and storage, which I think would be more impactful.
Any more questions for the agent? No. So thank you very much for answering our questions. Hannah, anything you want to pick up from what you've heard in the public speaking?
Yeah, would you like me to point out where the owl bakery is on the plans?
Yes, there were several things in the report where it said, I think 3 of them, it was the same as last time, but we have a different committee. So it would be good if you could just update the committee on those items. Ecology was certainly one. And the wildlife bird sanctuary and was it landscape as well? Yeah.
Yes, Chair. So landscape, I first visited the application site back in January of last year, and we popped out and had a look at the site where the stables currently is, and in agreement it was acceptable to put the stables in the proposed location for this application, purely because of the visual appearance of the current stables. Again, with this application, it's the same as last time, hence the comments have stated the same as last time. On the previous application, the landscape officer was involved heavily from the very beginning all the way to the end, and we concluded that the proposed location was acceptable, provided that the building was stained and the roof material was changed, so it became less prominent within the location, hence their comments in before. Ecology, again, they were addressed from beginning to end in the previous application, and also addressed the ecology information that was submitted previously. Again, they've submitted the same comments as before because the application is the same as before, but the main changes here is change of use of land. Again, with their comments, I do believe that they requested conditions to be placed on the application, which have also been placed on this application as well. Just one moment. So landscape conditions is condition 4, ecology is condition 5, and condition 6. And condition 7 is also ecology. So we have the same conditions on the previous application as we do on this one, with some obviously slightly wording is tweaked to adapt the timeframes. Sorry, Chair.
And have you mentioned what the owl?
So the Owl, I think it's the Owl Society, who help the neighbours in regards to obviously honing the owls themselves for the sanctuary. I did receive a letter from them. It was the same as before, and they expressed that they're concerned that the stables is impacting the owls in regards to human interaction and general maintenance of the stables themselves.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the report. And shall we do principle of development and design scale and impact on the character of the area? Pages 16, 17, 18 and 19.
Chairman, is it possible to have a clarification, please? On clarification, the location plan land ownership shows a small parcel of what is, I presume, residential going into the equestrian site. How does this work out legally, please?
Who's going to answer that?
If you look at page 29 and compare it with page 30, you'll see a small parcel of land which is currently residential is going into the equestrian. How does that stand legally?
Who's going to answer that?
Chair, if I may, sorry, Councillor Reid, referring to this whole section here. That's no section.
That's that little square, is it?
Yes, so when you visit the site, that very small little square that's obviously drawn on the location land ownership, it's just hedged off and it is part of the main residence.
Well, we need to clarify this. So we're just
Chairman, I think the response to Councillor Reid's question, it wouldn't have an impact. It's included in the red line application. So what they're doing is seeking to change the use of that piece of land that's in the red line to for keeping of horses. So it's a change of use to a quarter from agriculture. Obviously, that's a small piece of residential, but it has a bearing. If you wanted to approve this today, the area of land will change to land for keeping of horses.
okay. Thank you for that question. Any questions on principal development and design scale and impact on the character of the area? Councillor Farr?
Thank you, Chair. Could you explain to me the difference between a stable and a recreation stable?
I think sometimes when we're talking about, stables are predominantly for keeping the horses, aren't they? Sometimes.
Oh, that's a stable.
Well,
so
exactly.
what other uses are we going to have in the stable to make it recreation?
I think sometimes we differentiate between commercial and private recreational use, and in this case, the land is agriculture. They're seeking to change it to what they're calling private recreational keeping of horses. So rather than being a commercial enterprise where you may well have some stables that people come and go and, I'm not a horse person, so I'm not saying the right words, but you might have people come and do livery and other things, and that isn't the intention here. So I think sometimes when we talk about recreational horses, we mean for the private benefit of the landowners. In this case, that would be our phraseology to you. So it's private recreational.
Right.
Could I ask a question about the screening, landscape screening of the new proposed stables. That's on page 17 and sort of in the middle. Does condition 7 cover that? Because that is the promise that the stables will have landscape around them. I didn't think so, which is why I'm asking.
Chair, condition 7 can cover that. If you'd like a separate condition, we can put it on there.
Well, what I'm asking is that the proposed stables will be higher up and more visible, presumably. I mean, you showed us several slides of the current stables being visible. So the stables higher up would be more visible, would they?
Thank you, Chair. The sole purpose of relocating the stables is so they're not as visible, and the purpose of doing additional screening is not just necessarily to hide the building as such, because it doesn't need to be hidden. It's mainly for the biodiversity within the area.
It does say to reduce the impact of the building. So that's the location and the colour. I thought I read in the report that the landscaping would also screen the new position. Did I misread them?
You did show me. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it is there.
Chair, if I may, it will screen it, but it's not. That's not the sole purpose of the new hedging. The sole purpose of the hedging is to help with the biodiversity. The screening is just an added benefit.
I personally would like to see landscaping, more landscaping in that area. I don't know what the committee does. So that is another possible question to committee for a condition. Any other questions? Councillor Bento.
Yes, I can't see anything in the conditions here which will ensure that where the stable currently is, the ground there is recovered into a certain place. Am I wrong?
There is a condition on that. Condition 1.
Condition 1 should cover that.
But on that note, it just says within 3 months. And if you're building new stables, you wouldn't need the current ones, would you?
They won't be building new ones, Chair. They will be picking the building up and relocating it.
So those are not to be built until those are removed, or?
So they'll need to put the new base in first and then pick the stables up, relocate them in the new position, and then they'll be able to get rid of the original base.
Yeah. Is that clear in condition 1?
Chair, it's always tricky to get the wording right. We did look at this very carefully last time. I think I know that the decision was to refuse last time, but in the update sheet, these were updated conditions because Hannah and I went through them very carefully. And I thought they did cover what we wanted to. So it talks about within 3 months the date of that permission, or there is again, obviously if we need a little bit longer, but obviously not too much longer. The stable building hereby approved should be relocated to the approved position shown on the proposed block plan revision A. So we've cited the plan, and the concrete base of the existing structure should be removed and the land ceded to full grass. So I thought that was fairly specific in terms of it being an enforceable condition, Chair.
Well, I don't know why it would take 3 months to remove the current base from the existing structure.
Chair, there are other conditions that require pre-submission to us. So you have, in terms of looking at the conditions as a package, you have to think about other conditions. There are conditions that require submission to us of waste. We talked about that with condition 9. So they are pre-commencement. So we need to allow time for the works to operate. So I thought it would be unreasonable to give a shorter time frame on that one. although we do want to tie it down because we want to see that move happen quite quickly.
Okay. Any other questions on both issues? Councillor Reid.
Sorry, Chairman, can you just, on page 42, the west elevation, there looks like there could be clearish type panels in the roof. Am I reading that correctly?
Thank you, Chair. So part of the condition.
The lighting condition tends to be external, not internal.
The roof material will be changed because it is currently a stainless steel, highly prominent material, and it will be changed. I can't say off the top of my head right this second, but there is a condition 3. Materials used for the roof shall be submitted to and approved, so we get to officially finalise it. They will be submitted and we will be approving them.
And if there are any windows on?
There shouldn't be any windows on the roof.
Okay.
We won't approve anything on the roof there.
Could I also ask, this application is attached to the owners of the current property. If the land is subsequently separated from that house, what is the situation
Gemma, the condition requires that this land and these stables to be kept in conjunction with that. If they decide to sever them, they would need to apply to vary that condition and come back to us with an alternative proposal.
Could you point me to the condition, please? I know it says it's just for the owner's horses. I know there's a condition on that.
And let's just say condition 10, Chair. Thank you.
Well, okay. I can think of scenarios where that wouldn't be tight enough, but possibly they're not feasible scenarios. So shall we move on then to impact on residential amenity? Councillor Weir.
Chair, he seems to have skipped over. Apologies, Chair, we seem to have skipped over levels, drainage and runoff, or did we just slide into that one? Because I did want to raise some questions on that particular topic. First of all, why the officer hasn't addressed policy SD 17, which addresses groundwater protection. There is a lot of research and evidence in the South Downs area around the impact of equine facilities on water contamination, and given the presentations we've heard this morning, this really is a concern at this site. Yet with this change of use, it would have seemed to me we should have specifically addressed SD 17. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I looked at the SD 17 when you mentioned the councillor where I didn't think it was applicable for his application, more so because the closest piece of water, shall we say, is the pond in the hayloft, which is approximately 35 metres away. That's also man-made, so that's not linked to any other rivers close by or as such. So I didn't think there was any impact at all.
Can I just come back on that, because clearly we have a 3-stable block here. Whether it's 2 horses or 3 horses, there's going to be a lot of water activity, washing down the areas, washing out stables. As I can see it, the stables aren't sealed, so there could be leakage from the back of the stables down in, and as we've heard, this is only 8 metres away from our house, and the neighbours are considering putting a borehole in there. So we have contaminated water going in there. It seems it's highly relevant that we should be looking at SD 17 in this context.
Chairman, if I could, I would just remind members that we didn't refuse this scheme on that matter last time. We refused it solely on the impact of the stables and built form. That would be looking to introduce a new reason that wasn't covered last time. I would just like to remind members of that fact before we start. And I think
And these things are tricky, but what we have to do, I mean, the use of this land for agricultural purposes could create that same contamination if they had other animals. We talked about nitrates earlier, couldn't we? They could generate those matters as well. And I just don't think that would be a sufficient reason, Chair, to refuse this proposal. I understand members raising that concern, but your officer view is that we couldn't substantiate that, Chair.
Playing devil's advocate, this is a new application, and you always say that we should consider the application in front of us, and a new position of stables, which could affect the water situation.
Chairman, the stables are proposed in the same position as last time, and the appeal inspector's decision is a significant material consideration to have regard to in the determination of this application.
Sorry, just this slight argument. I can't see why, if the application is for a new position, surely we have to consider the new position.
Chairman, this application is the same as last time. So in the previous application, the stables were to be recited, and that's what we refused the scheme on, the recited proposal. So it's exactly what you have in front of you now, other than the addition of the change of use of land, because the inspector was concerned under the Wheatcroft principle that hadn't been part of the description of development formally, and that's what we really have before you now. So the material difference from this application to last is that this includes the change of use of the land from agriculture to the keeping of horses.
Okay, thank you. We don't have in our report what our reasons for refusal were. I know what they were, but I think possibly we should be as a committee reminded.
I could read them out to you if that would help.
Yeah, let's go with Councillor Reid's question first. Yes, thank you, that'd be useful.
Chairman, you very ably covered it as well, so it was just the position comment.
So could we just be reminded of the reasons for refusal last time, which has been to appeal?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The reason for refusal last time, it was one single reason: the proposed siting of the stables, track and alterations to land levels results in harm to the landscape character of this part of the national park by reason of siting, scale and raising land fails to reflect the context and type of landscape and special qualities of the national park, and fails to demonstrate a conservation-based land management approach to development, contrary to policy SD24, SD4 of the South Downs National Park Local Plan adopted the 2nd of July 2019 and for bracket 2014 to 2033, which is the plan period for the National Parks Plan policy.
Thank you. And I do have SD24 in front of me, and in fact it was specific areas of, it was A, B, D and G that the committee were refusing it on. So A is of a scale or an intensity of equestrian use compatible with the landscape and special qualities. B is demonstrate good design while located, respond to local character and distinctiveness. And D is a new buildings, stables and so on, providing respect the amenities and activities of surrounding properties. And G, demonstrate a conservation-based land management approach. So that was what we listed last time, and you're going to tell me that the inspector ignored it.
Chairman, what I would say, and we added the inspector's reasons, his decision letter in the update sheet, so as all members could read it directly for themselves. And I think you heard the agent quoting some of it. He described the land at the moment as a manicured enclosed paddock, which is seen in association with the host dwelling, and already results, in his view, in a degree of domesticity that has lessened the more rural and farming dominated qualities of the area. He talked about overall the modestly scaled building is typical of its intended function. Oh, apologies. It's an assumption, isn't it? That it's, I normally refer to inspectors as a he, meaning he, she. So overall, the modestly scaled building is typical of its intended function and does not appear disproportionately large relative to the paddock or out of context of the landscape, given the proximity of domestic buildings nearby. It says the stable block would be more discreet in the landscape once relocated, owing to the landform features such as trees, including those to be planted. The track would also be more sensitively scaled, surfaced and less impactful. She also then goes on and says, for the reasons the proposal will not have a harmful effect on the character or appearance of the area and would preserve the natural beauty of the wider national park. It would therefore comply in particular with policies SD4 and SD24 of the national park. Amongst other things, those policies seek to ensure new developments of design, layout and scale that conserve and enhances existing landscape character, and in relation to questioning development is of a scale compatible with the landscape. And I think that covers the reason for refusal that we added. She also went on and talked about that she did not consider that the noises, smells or intensity of use of such a modest stable block would give rise to materially harmful effects to the living conditions of the neighbouring occupiers. So I think, I haven't read all of it, but I've read out the pertinent paragraphs, Chair, in terms of it responding to our reason for refusal.
Thank you. Any further questions? Questions on anything really? Debate. Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to this and done some research and visited the site on previous occasion. I cannot see a material change in what was proposed this time compared to last time. I think the problems that we had with waste storage, we need to condition that if we are minded to do it. Close proximity to boreholes and the water source of the River Mearn are paramount importance, and I think that the inspector also pointed out that the agricultural use of the land would not support keeping horses, and therefore I don't feel that I would support this application at all.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Weir. And then Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is the first time I've sat on this case, but it is a new application for a change of use. And I think that this warranted quite serious consideration of the issues arising from the change of use, which I regret to say I don't think have been fully considered in this report. I think there are some serious environmental questions that have not been answered in this report that do need further consideration. The proposals for storage of waste from the stables should have been integrated into the application. That is good practice. I've looked at other cases across the South Downs area, and we should expect that to happen on an application of this sort, and particularly in a sensitive location like this. So I think there are a number of areas where a change of use application would have required much more information coming forward and provisions, which I don't think can simply be conditioned at this stage. So I won't be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson, and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. The site visit in August, as most of us went to, was sort of helped to illustrate Hannah's report, which personally I think are pretty good. Frankly, I don't know what else would be added, so it's not more than pretty good, it's very good. So thank you for that, Hannah. The guidance is very clear. Then we've got to read that in conjunction and think what we said previously and in conjunction with the inspector's report is. The inspector's report is quite clear that with the adjustments that we understand are taking place, we don't have any legs to stand on to turn this one down. I've got to say, having said that, I'm very nervous about soil stability on this slope. As Councillor Laming pointed out, the pressure on the walls, particularly the wall which we saw around the swimming pool of the neighbouring property. But equally, I'm also concerned from Horses health, the Equine Society, I guess, is best one to give advice on this, and we don't have that available. But there was no turf on that paddock when we were there. It was grass growing between flint. Now, if you're going to use this site for recreational purposes, one presumes trotting, galloping, and I know there's a condition about this, there's going to be movable jumps on there, unless we say specifically thou shalt not. Then a horse is going to be jumping onto effectively a bed of flint. It reminds me that in the 1950s, most schoolboys were very proud of the position of a jackknife, because with a jackknife, with a spike on there, it allowed you to make stones and horses.
Did you keep it relevant, please?
Well, that is relevant, because I mean, if you're going to jump on this site, you're going to get stones in the horse's hooves. So, what more relevant can you get, Chairman? I mean, it's I know we don't have jackknives around nowadays, and pupils at that time didn't go around stabbing other people.
Could we leave that?
Okay. So I mean, that's the reservation I have. But again, we had our attention drawn to the inspector's report, and we know very well we have to respect what the inspectors say, even though we may disagree. The fact is, the inspectors give a definitive answer, and we can't get around that. So even though I have reservations, I'm looking at Hannah's report, which I think is a very good one, and the inspector's comments, and then I believe that we frankly have to give permission of this, even though objectors have voiced their comments, so I agree with, but we have this evidence here. We can't deny it. It's there, black and white. Full stop. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. As already pointed out, this is a new application. And each application must be judged in its own right. The fact that the last time we failed as a committee possibly to pick up SD17, which I think is crucial, and Councillor Weir is quite correct. This is something that could have a very large effect on the waterways around the locality. It is a collection point, as Councillor Appleby tried to demonstrate when he gave his presentation. Also, the increased element of the track means that somewhere between 12 and 15% of the site will be taken up with compacted material in order to produce the, I know at the last application, I think we spoke about it being closer to the field entrance. That way it would fall in line with the backdrop of the trees. However, that's not the application before us. I think there are some concerns here, and I think SD17 is quite an important one. And I'd like to thank members for actually drawing that one out. Also, SD24 has still not been answered correctly. So, on this occasion, Chairman, I'm unable to go along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Any further contributions? I too, well, I support everything Councillor Reid has just said. It is a new application, and what we're ending up with is a track on two sides of the field instead of just one side. It's moved much nearer the wild bird sanctuary, and that would be covered in SD24. And there is still, in my mind, then why do they need 3 stables when the field doesn't support 3 stables? So in that case, they need to bring in food, and where will they store that? So I can see potential for extra structures coming in, I just feel, I know what the inspector said, and normally I do agree with the inspector. I don't on this occasion, and I will be not voting for the application, and I still don't think they've answered a lot of the SB24 reasons that we gave before, and I don't think it's suitable for the use proposed for equine. It's currently agricultural, and I don't think I've been persuaded that it should change to horses. Any further contributions? We have talked about extra conditions, haven't we? I don't know who's going to talk to me about it. What about landscaping around the stables?
Chairman, I think there were two extra conditions that I heard from members. One was, as you say, around that landscaping. So rather than it being for biodiversity net gain, it was also for privacy, wasn't it? And perhaps for the landscape green. And the other one, I think, was about the apron at the frontage of the stable block and securing details of that surface material. So it's a piece of concrete sort of hard apron, it would be a permeable surface, perhaps of an appropriate appearance. And those are the two conditions additional. I think we've had a lot from other members, but condition 9 does deal with waste facilities for and I think there's another conditions we have talked about, and that was condition 8 covered that. So I think I don't recommend, based on what I had, Chair, 2 additional conditions if members were minded to approve the scheme.
I have Councillor Learning who wants to speak.
Yeah.
Councillor Pearson.
Whilst you say the waste is covered, I'd like to see it stipulated where the waste is actually deposited in irregularity of collection from that point.
I think that's what the condition is.
That's what conditions requires.
Exactly, those proposed.
Yeah, and that's what they've asked for detail.
No, because we need to say where it goes, because that is quite permissible.
Chairman, that's what we could do. That's one of those conditions that requires information to be submitted to us, and then we would consult with our environmental health colleagues on the appropriate siting, how it's stored there and its frequency of removal, because they do, as you say, have specific guidance on that. They're not concerned in this case, other than we would want to secure that information and make sure it happened for the life of this stable building. So I'm quite satisfied that condition is regular, it's standard, and it's one we use frequently. And that covers that, Chair.
I would like to see it far away from the actual neighbour's property and the house sanctuary, because that's correct. Be careful.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, noted, Chair. I think if you're minded to approve it, we've heard that. The agent has heard that, and that should form part of any submission. And we will consult our environmental health colleagues.
So that's condition 9. It doesn't cover the storage of extra food because there's not enough food in the field. Anyway, that's probably a minor matter. Any other? Councillor Pearson, sorry.
2 points to make, Chairman. If reminded to accept this, can we add no burning of manure on site to condition 9 to make sure?
Well, that's
from the past.
we normally prosecute in that case, but
And the other one,
informative, you say that?
Yeah, you're quite right. We wouldn't want to see that, and we could add it into the condition, but I don't think that's necessary. We could add informative. Environmental health would be straight on it if there was any burden.
We normally put it as an informative, don't we?
I think sometimes we do, Chair. I think because we operate the national park in this case, they don't like to see the proliferation of informatives on their decision process, so we have a slightly different approach in this case. But I don't think they would have any objection to us adding that, Chair.
We could put it in condition 9.
We could add a rider in there, couldn't we? Then that should be no burning.
And then you had another one?
yes, the second one is that we've had a suggestion there's no need for any comment about nitrates moving off the site. I'm rather surprised about that, because one of the concerns we have is the toxic nature of manure standing, and that liquid's got to go somewhere and it's got to go off the site, or it's going to go into the ground, in which case you get nitrate pollution, which naturally is specifically again. So can we have a second thought about any mitigation you may think about that, if we're minded to accept this?
There's no mention of nitrates in the report.
No, Chair, because the case that we've looked at with Natural England only relates to human waste, and animal waste like this is dealt with by other licensing bodies and not through the planning process. So, yeah.
So with those 2 extra conditions, should this be approved, be acceptable to the committee, one on landscaping and one on the stable, and one on the details of the apron in front of the stable. You know, I'm not.
If the vote goes that way, then I'm agree with this.
Okay. Okay, I think that's agreed. I think I can see lots of nods. Okay, this application has been recommended for approval. Those in favour, please show.
That's one, Chair.
And against?
That's 8, Chair.
Now we have to come up for reasoning of against. Could I start with the 24?
SD 17.
And Ruthie would like SD 17, even though it wasn't there before.
No, it's a new application.
Chairman, what would be helpful for us to hear is, yes, the policies, but actually what the planning harm is that you're identifying, because the policy goes to the heart of making sure we can substantiate reason for refusal, but actually we have to identify the planning harm in that, and I think, you know, SD 24 is about the principle of stabling, isn't it, and those.
There's planning harm, that's all environmental harm.
Well, it's planning harm to start with, and then the policies identify what that harm may be. Obviously, SD 17 talks about environmental pollution, doesn't it, from water. SD 24 is about the principle of stabling, etc. So what would just be really helpful for us to hear in terms of how can we formulate a reason for refusal, what that planning harm is as a result of those policy objections, Chair.
So could I start? SD 24A, the question development of a scale compatible with the landscape and the special qualities. I think it's still going to be visible. I don't think it fits in with it, even if it's got landscaping, because landscaping dies back in the winter. And then B, good design, well located. I don't think it's well located. And then D, it's locate new buildings and stables adjacent to existing buildings where they respect the amenities and activities of surrounding properties and uses. Well, this certainly doesn't respect the wild bird sanctuary because it's even nearer. Was there another one when we? Yeah, we had G before. Conservation-based land management. I think we can sustain. Any other suggestions? SD 17 has been suggested, even though we didn't object to it on that.
5.151.
Pardon?
5.151 in SG 17.
It's just to save time. Could you just point me to the page?
Page 77. It goes on to say development should also seek to enhance groundwater.
All right, yes. So SD 17, did you want to pick out any parts of it or?
Yeah. It says policy SD2 ecosystems and development should also seek to deliver enhancement toward groundwater. Now this won't, will it?
Chairman, if I could come in and help you here. I'm sorry to say, but I really do, I appreciate that you feel that it hasn't overcome SD 24A, B, D. However, the appeal inspector very clearly said it had dealt with those matters, and I just would want to sort of alert members to the fact that if we're trying to argue something that an inspector has already said is acceptable, you may well want to hear from your solicitor on that, Chair. In terms of SD17, we didn't refuse it on that reason, on those matters last.
New application.
Yeah. We didn't refuse.
This is finished.
Thank you. We didn't refuse it on those matters last time, but as you said, it is now incorporating a change of use of this land, as well as the siting of the stabling, etc. So, for me as your officer, the only strength I feel in the reason for refusal, and I've just drafted something out here, and you'll have to tell me if that captures what you were thinking, is that the change of use of this land to an equestrian use will affect the water quality by pollution to groundwater, surface water runoff, and watercourse storage of features contrary to SD17 of the South Wales National Park Local Plan. And I think from what I've heard, that would encapsulate your reason for refusal. I'd be much more cautious, Chair, about refusing it again on SD24 in the Building Inspector's decision. But obviously, we'll take it's the committee's decision here today, but you may well want to hear from your Solicitor, Chair, before you can confirm it.
Well, I'm not backing down from SD24. Committee?
Chair, did you want to hear from me at all?
Um,
Did you want to hear from me at all?
Yes, of course.
I'm really just going to reiterate what the advice that Julie's already given you, that the inspector's decision is a significant material planning consideration, and the stable is in the same location and it's the same stable as you considered previously, and which the inspector clearly addressed and felt was not unacceptable.
Well,
So as I would just moving and just moving on from that, as Julie has advised you, that the difference between this application today and the previous application considered by the inspector is simply the change of use, and her advice to you is to deal with the reasons for refusal related to the change of use only, which is the difference between this and the last application. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we have the track, don't we? Because the change of use means that we have to have the track on two sides of the field.
Chairman, there's only one track and the inspector is satisfied with the track.
I think we just got to the point where we're going to vote. So the proposal is that we address SD24, SD17, and the one that you said, Julie, which is number
SD17, Chair, would be my recommendation to you. SD17 would be my only recommendation.
Yeah, but you didn't want to pick out anything from SD17.
I think it would be safer, Chair, to use the reason for refusal that I've given, and that would give your officers an opportunity to argue appropriate paragraphs from that.
Which reason was that?
Chair, it's all of them. So use SD17. We don't need to limit ourselves at this time. But I mean, I was reading particularly number 3, which talks about development proposals must incorporate measures to eliminate risk of pollution to groundwater, surface water, and watercourse corridors. That talks about ecological and chemicals. So I also wanted to bring in number 1 and perhaps particularly maybe possibly some of C. I think we need to do a little bit more research, Chair. So, but I think we've had the members have said.
SD17 is fine.
So we can pick out that.
Climate change is becoming more important and more urgent, isn't it? So that could be a reason for now wanting to include it. Or we could come clean and say, sorry, we didn't think to do it before.
We have to identify what the planning harm was as a result of that, and I think we've heard the inspector say the siting of these stables in this location would be acceptable. It's the change of use that we're looking at really that's different from the appeal, and I think my advice would be to keep that to SD17, Chair, and not go further beyond that. It's your decision, but that's my professional advice to you.
Okay, we'll have a vote. All those in favour of using SD17 as a reason to refuse it?
Okay, that's 8, Chairman.
And SD24?
2, 3,
4.
4, Chairman. Yeah.
So that is just SD17. So now we have to vote on that. So this application is proposed to be refused for SD 17 reasons. Those in favour?
Okay,
Against?
it was 7
One
for
abstention.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah,
Did you have your hand up? That's so 8, yeah, 8 for and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Well, we've spent a very long time on this. We have given this thorough talk through, and we're going to have a break now up until that clock, so 11:15 for 25 past normal time. Okay. I didn't have to go through the safety. So moving on then in the agenda item 6, 20/02826/FUL, a single dwelling to be built, a 4-bedroom chalet bungalow with garden, double garage and hard standing parking for a further 2 cars at the Gem, Barnett's Wood Lane, Byton, Alderford, Hampshire. Case officer is Catherine Watson. And when you're ready, Kat, we're ready to hear the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for a new dwelling, 3 bedrooms on the ground floor and 1 bedroom on the 2nd floor. And here we can see the site plan.
Just take a step back from the mic. Yeah. Keep it to the side.
Is that any better, Chair? Yeah. Okay. I'll just start again. So the application is for a chalet bungalow in the countryside. Here you can see the location plan, the relationship between the site and the neighbouring dwellings. Here again, we've got the location plan, so marked in red at the top, and you can see the outline of the proposed dwelling and garage. At the bottom of this page, you can see a closer up version and how the proposed development fits within the site. Here we've got the existing and proposed site plan. So at the top, we've got the existing, the site is demarcated by the blue lines. The green lines show you the grass verge, and beyond the green lines, we've got Barnett's Wood Lane. The bottom picture shows the layout of the proposed dwelling, garage, hard standing and garden. And here we have the ground floor plan, so we can see to the left-hand side we've got three bedrooms, and the right-hand side is an open plan living dining space. And then here we have the first floor, and we can see that there is a single bedroom with ensuite within the first floor level. Here we have the garage, so the garage is proposed to be a double garage with room for an additional car parked adjacent and bike store. And here we have the elevations of the proposed garage. And then we have the proposed elevations for the main dwelling. So it's a two-part dwelling, two sort of modular elements linked together. So for the top elevation, that's the front. Then we've got in the middle, we've got the two end elevations. Left-hand side elevation is predominantly all glazed, and then the bottom we've got the rear elevation. So here we can see the site. At present there is a large caravan that the applicant is residing in. So on the left hand side we can see the caravan, and then looking down towards the end of the photo we've got the nearest residential dwelling, Tacoma. And on the right hand side we've got another view of the caravan. Then on the left hand side we've got the trackway, which is Barnett's Wood Lane. It's also a public right of way. At the very end of the picture you might just be able to make out the caravan. And then on the right hand side looking up the track towards Tacoma, but we can also see the current access point for the plot. And then again, left-hand side, we've got the caravan with Tacoma in the distance. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a caravan. Also, there is a horse box on the site. That ends my presentation, Chair. My recommendation is to refuse the reasons set out on page 55 of the report. I'm happy to answer any questions like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to public speaking. So first of all, we have Councillor Power, who is reading out a statement for Byton Parish Council.
Chairman, thank you. I met with Byton Parish Council Chairman yesterday. He's sorry he can't be here. We don't have a statement. My mission here is to support the recommendations from the officer, to make a minor correction to the officer's report. The pub is now called the Three Horseshoes, and it is an excellent village pub. I recommend it thoroughly. We are joined at the hip on this one, Byton Parish Council and I. It's gross overdevelopment of the site. I was bemused. I was trying to find some redeeming features in the application.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Power. Is this Byton Parish Council?
Byton Parish Council.
Okay. So you're saying I, but that
we.
Okay.
We are united.
Okay.
In objecting to the overdevelopment of the site. I was perplexed by the comments by some supporters that there had been a home on the site, and I dug further into this with the help of Byton Parish Council. There was a railway carriage on the site which was lived in by a lady in the 1950s. That was common practice after the war, as most of you are old enough to remember. And then there was a mobile home put on the site in 2019, which was burnt down in 2020, and now we have a caravan and a horse box, all without planning consent. I don't know where the septic tank is. I couldn't find out where it was shown on the plans, but I'd have doubts as to where they're going to fit it in, given the development of the plot. Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions from councillors.
Mrs. Sutherland, can we ask Councillor Power questions about the Byton Parish Council?
Chair, I'm still actually slightly unclear as to whether Councillor Power is speaking currently for the Parish Council and is then going to speak on her own behalf separately, or whether this is a combined.
This is a combined subject.
So, Chair, in that case, obviously, if Councillor Power isn't going to say anything further.
As Councillor, Councillor Power, you have 5 minutes. You didn't use all the 3 minutes allotted to the Byton Parish Council. So is there anything else you want to say?
I completely support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, right.
And
So
I think all the reasons are in there.
Anyone like to ask questions of Councillor Power? Could I ask, and you might not know the answer, but there was mention in the report that the applicant removed something which allowed large vehicles to come in?
Yes, there was a height There was a height restriction gate on the lane by this site. You can see it on Google Maps. If you go through you can go back in date on Google Maps, and the height restriction barriers are installed on lots of our byways in order to prevent travel access. So the local farmer will have a key, and I know the local farmer does have a large store of straw up there at the moment. But it has been removed. I don't have any proof that it was done by the applicant.
No, but are they going to be replaced?
That would be a matter for highways, Chairman.
Right, the Parish Council have written and asked them to replace it? Or?
I'm not aware. I will ask them to do so.
Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, Councillor Power, the 2 lanes you've mentioned, you refer in your comments, Office report mentions the comments about the PROW. Are these two lanes green lanes?
They're not specified as green lanes, Councillor Pearson. They are rights of way.
Are they farm tracks then?
They are used by the farm, but they are also rights of way.
Oh, right, okay. Thank you.
Any further questions for Councillor Parr? Stroke, Byton Parish Council? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Parr. Thank you. We go to our report, and we could have questions on anything really. It's quite a short report. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, on page 50, Chair, there's a reference to radon protection by the Environmental Services. Now, radon is normally associated with landfill site. Could just explain exactly, could you explain exactly what the Environmental Services are talking about there?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure how it would impact on the development, other than that our Environmental Protection Department has a record of any sites that would be likely to have subterranean sort of radon. I think it would be, what they've said is that if development were permitted, they need to then submit reports and details of what level of radon is there and what mitigation works they would need to do to ensure that it wasn't a hazard to the occupants of the new dwelling or any neighbouring dwellings.
So this is you're referring to the contamination report that the Environmental Protection people did about 12 years ago?
I'm not sure when the report was, but I know that that's what our environmental protection officers have stated, that there would need to be that information.
They didn't have
and
enough
mitigation.
information to say whether it was or not, so they
No.
earnings are appropriate. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the report? No? Debate. So this application has been recommended for refusal, and the reasons are set out on page 55 for them. All those in favour of refusing this application, please show.
That's 9 unanimous, Chair.
So that application is refused. Thank you very much. So we move on. Oh, have we got members of the public coming in? No. Then we move on then to a report which is only with us because it is an existing councillor's report. We're just waiting for the change over. So thank you, Kat. Thank you. Are you doing it, Julie?
Slide up.
Oh, Jordan. Morning. Afternoon. Morning, Jordan.
Morning.
Morning.
This Councillor Godfrey. This Councillor Godfrey. Not Mr. Godfrey. It says Mr.
Yeah.
So we move on to agenda item 7, 21/01692/HOU, which is to demolish the existing side extension, construct a new side extension, internal alterations to existing house, demolish the existing garage and build a new annex and connecting corridor to the house. And it's at Mount Pleasant, 119 Downs Road, South Ormsted. The case officer is Jordan Wiseman. And when you're ready, Jordan, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Okay, good morning everyone. This is the application site here, 119 Downs Road, outlined in red. You can just see to the left hand side here, the existing garage. Again, slightly more zoomed out site location, just showing the site in context with the rest of Downs Road, patched out there in the orange. So here we've got the existing and proposed front elevations. So the proposed are along the top, with the existing along the bottom. So on the existing front elevation, you can see the front of the garage there, which is linked via a access gate to the rear garden. And on the right hand side is a single-storey flat roof side extension, which is there at the moment, I believe to be used as a home office. And along the top, the front elevation here shows the new proposed side extension in place of the garage, which is to be used as an ancillary annex. And on the right hand side, the replacement side extension, which is to be used as a utility room, just internal additional living space. On the right hand side of the page shows the proposed rear elevation. So along the back, the right hand side at the bottom, you can see the rear of the garage, back of the side access gate, and again the side extension on the other side. And on the top, see the rear of the annex, and on the left, the proposed side extension. These show the existing and proposed east elevations. So top left hand side, proposed east elevation, west elevation, and the annex. On the bottom, existing. On the right hand side, proposed side extension to the east, and existing on the bottom. Here we've got the existing proposed floor plans. On the left hand side of the screen, see the existing garage here, and on the right hand side, existing side extension, both to be demolished. On the right hand side shows the proposed, with the proposed annex, which you can see extends considerably further out to the rear of the property into the rear garden, and on the right hand side again, the proposed side extension, which again extends further up to the rear of the property. Moving on to the site photographs, this is the front of the property, which looks towards the north. You can see the existing garage here in the top left photo, and in the bottom right you can see large amounts of the front of the property are screened by a large hedge fronting along Downs Road. Again, top left is looking northeast. Still see it's quite heavily screened to Downs Road, and the bottom right is looking northeast, where you can catch more of a glimpse of that front elevation of the driveway. So again, just more photos of the around the front of the property. Top left looking northeast, that's the whole of the front elevation, and bottom right is looking, it's a closer look at the garage and side elevation where the proposed annex is to be. This is the rear of the property, and the top left looks southeast. Over here is again screened quite well, quite to the neighbours by boundary treatment, which is in the form of mature hedging, planting. This is the side where the proposed side extension is to be. On this side, in the bottom right, shows, you can't quite see it, but it's the current rear of the garage and where the proposed annex will be. Next two photos, this is looking towards the back of the application site in the top left, which is looking to the north. And the bottom right, looking south out on down the road. And there I'm taking the photos in front of the existing garage. Concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. And we have no public speakers. So we move on to questions on anything. Councillor Reid.
Chairman, on page 73, we refer to highways and parking. Are we happy that a vehicle or vehicles can still manoeuvre from a forward location to get onto the road?
Yes, I'm satisfied that they would be able to. The annex where the garage is currently located doesn't really move forward any further than the existing garage. It's quite a long driveway. The photos don't really do it too much justice. Reverse the car on, so you can just see in the corner there the pink car. You could reverse it and pull back out if they needed to.
Thank you.
Could I ask you, Jordan, the linking corridor?
Yeah.
What is that going to look like? Is it sort of like a lower structure or?
Let's start with this. So looking at the plans, it will look marginally taller than the existing entrance gate. I believe that there's going to be some sort of glazed door there, which gives.
It doesn't stick out.
No, it doesn't stick out. It's flush with that the front of the annex.
What is the roof?
The roof is going to be roof tiles to match the existing.
It's quite a long corridor, isn't it? It could be quite long.
So the roof of the corridor is to be a flat roof. There's a door in front, and you can just see there's another glazed door to the rear. So yes, chances are it's going to be quite dark in there, but it's just to move from the main house into the annex.
And this is my ignorance, but could I ask what K-Rend is?
K-Rend, so at the moment the main house is Pebble Dash. K-Rend isn't too dissimilar to Pebble Dash. It's a bit nicer, but it comes in sort of like a rough textured material which goes on the outsides of buildings. It comes in various different colours, usually neutral colours. But you'll see I've, in the recommended condition later on, requested samples of that, so we're not sure what the colour and the texture is going to look like yet. So I just want to make sure of that.
Thank you. Councillor,
does that actually increase the efficiency of the building and the insulation control?
I'm not sure, sorry.
Any further questions? So we move on to debate. There are no representation and objections. The advantages that I see are the two flat roofs going and they are matching all the tiles and the windows and the doors. So I think it's going to look okay. And I have no problems with it. Any more contribution? And so this has been recommended for approval. Those in favour, please show.
That's 9 unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
So that application is approved. And we move on to the last application for today. We've got the officers change over. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, we might, we've got members of the public to try. Oh, yeah, new members of Parliament.
I'm no say, you and I.
They've not been well, have they?
Sleeping in the woods.
Yes, yeah, we got it's
Ivan, could you possibly say to Esther that members of the public? Ah, here we go. Morning, welcome to the Winchester City Council Planning Committee. We are just about to discuss agenda item 8, which is the confirmation of Tree Preservation Order 2298, land at Biggs Cox, Bosley Road, Sheffield. The case officer is Ivan Gerber. And when you're ready, Ivan, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This comes to committee because of one objection to the TPO. Biggs Copse, just a little bit of background of Biggs Copse, is a site of importance for nature conservation, so it's a sink. Biggs Copse is seen on the 1866 OS map and is listed in the ancient Woodland inventory. The woodland is clearly visible from Botley Road, as I'll show you in some photographs, giving a high regional and public community value. The woodland is mostly formed of veteran oaks and beech, but there has been some replanting of trees in there to maintain the stock from the previous owner. Basically, overall, Biggs Copse is a very good example of an ancient woodland with lots of ancient woodland indicators, which are the plants to show that they've been here for many years. Now, just quickly to brief you what an ancient woodland is, it takes hundreds of years to establish and is defined as an irreplaceable habitat. That's why it's the sink. And it's important for the wildlife it supports, the soil that's in there, its recreational value, cultural history and landscape value, and has been continuously wooded since at least 1600 AD. So, you know, it's been around a long time. And it also includes the ancient semi-natural mainly native trees and shrubs native to the site, so the beech and oak are native, and they've come back from reseeding, so regeneration means it's regenerated, so over the years to keep itself going. Now this is Biggs Copse here, just on the arrow, if I can see it. There, yes, this Biggs Copse itself, this is Biggs Copse Woodland itself. This is known as locally as Chalky Lane that comes up here. And this here is the Botley Road. So this is the main road that goes through Shedfield. If you go that way, it takes you eventually through to Botley. If you come this way, it takes you through to Wickham, turn onto the main road straight into Wickham, further up here. So this is the main site here. This is view from the woodland, from the sort of fields next to it. As you can see in the background, mature trees in the back there. The next slide, this is the actual view from Botley Road itself, the main road. So this is Biggs Copse here, the trees are there. Now, there's a history to the woodland. Has been construction of a log cabin in the woodland without permission. There's been trenching across the woodland to the cabin for drainage. We've had construction vehicles driving through the woodland to get to the log cabin, driving through routes, parking within the woodlands, I'll show you in a minute. Horses disturbing the soil, exposing the tree roots, and the tipping recent horse manure wood shavings, hay and straw within the woodland. And this is the log cabin that was started constructed, but also has been stopped by enforcement notice. That has got a concrete screed floor inside of the woodland itself. You can actually see soil disturbance here. This is made of soil here, and I don't know if you can see, but it's actually a digger. I've driven a digger through the woodland. So there's in the soil there. So this soil's been imported in to cover over the valuable woodland floor, which would kill any plants underneath there.
There's also been stripping of soil. You can see a change in soil levels. We've got the original woodland floor here, and then we've got a drop here, there, for the log cabin. So there's been all the tree roots there have been exposed. The woodland floor have been disturbed for the tree roots and all the wood indicator plants that are in there as well. The trenching has gone across the chalky lane. It comes out of the, as you can see, the log cabin. It's come through and has now been dug through. I've lost the mouse. Yeah. You can see the trench and the exposed tree roots there. So a digger has been in there and has broken through the tree roots in the ground. You can see the broken tree roots hanging outside the trench. So that's come across the woodland into chalky lane. Again, a picture of that's the pipe in the trench. Again, that's connected to there. So the next one is we've now got the owner has now decided to tip manure into the woodland. Well, this is going to heat up, as you know, decomposition and stuff decomposes. It creates heat. Heat will create a good environment for fungal to grow on tree roots. It will kill the tree roots. It will suffocate the tree roots because they cannot breathe. Also, you've got the contamination from the manure itself into the ground. It's raw manure going into the ground. So, yeah, that's bad news for tree roots and bad news for trees and indicator plants in the woodlands. Also, piles of manure again tipped, just tipped inside. You can see in that photograph trenches where the bear was back into the woodland. It's caused disturbance, it's caused compaction, it's caused much damage to the woodland floor and to the tree roots, which will eventually have an effect on the trees to kill the tree roots off and the trees begin to die. Again, manure has been spread around, so again, raising the soil levels, it's been pushed around the woodland. And this is the tray they've been using. When I got there, it's just before I took this photograph, there was a telehanded earth forward that had been thrown out the woodland there. So that's what's been used to take the manure around the woodland, dump it. And you can see here, on the mouse, you can see this is compaction where they've been driving vehicles through the woodland. So again, this is all bad news for tree roots. Compaction, it's going to crush the tree roots, it's going to kill the tree roots. They're going to suffocate because there's no exchange of moisture or exchange of air. So it's going to stagnate, cap over. So really bad for health for the trees. This is again a construction vehicle parked in the woodland itself. You can see, the transit van park. You can see we've got a little cabin there, and you can see all the compaction going on around here. People walk around here, vans driving in and out of the woodlands. We also have horses running through the woodland, disturbing the woodland floor. You can see this is the ground that's been turned up. You can't, as far as you can also see fibrous roots of the trees that have been exposed. So once the roots have been exposed to air, they're going to die. Very fine. The hairs on your head, the roots are very, very delicate. It's very shallow. Any disturbance to the roots will have detrimental effect on the tree health. Again, it will affect the woodlands and its long-term health. Horses there, there's horses there in the woodland. You can see just in the sort of foreground here, getting this to down the bottom here. This is all disturbed ground when the horses have been running through the woodland. Again, you can see the brown. This is disturbed. These are tree roots. These actually were. You can see fibrous and light brown from the beech tree there. So that is bad news for trees. So compaction, disturbance, and it affects the whole sort of vitality of the woodland and the well-being of the woodland. So impacts of what's happening to the woodlands. As before, we've got compaction of soil with the woodland floor, damaging tree roots, construction vehicles. And there's our horse food. Contamination of the woodland from cement, so you've got cement from the cabin floor. You've got contamination tipping of the horse manure, the wood shavings, and the
hay and as it breaks down, so it creates heat. Trenching across the woodland floor, so you've got breaking of the tree roots, the snapping of the tree roots. As a digger, pulls back, it will break the tree roots, snap them off. Getting tree root from borders to serpents or exposing roots. And tree root asphyxiation, that's where, from raising the soil, so that would create heat, create moisture, excessive raising the soil from tipping. So you're creating, not only killing the tree roots off, but you're creating an atmosphere which is ideal for fungal to grow, temperature growing, temperature rising, fungus love warmth, and some moisture, so that's ideal for them. And again, you've got the change of soil structure, so you're adding nutrients to the soil and fungi, so you're actually changing the aspects of the soil and the woodland. So we did have an objection from the landowner's agent, who said it was not expedient to serve the TPO, as the trees were protected under the Fair Life Society response and explained. The outback cannot serve more than one temporary TPO in immediate effect on the same group of trees. The TPO is not expedient as the trees are not located within the conservation. So I'll explain further points in a minute. The Secretary of State does not specify the colour of the line to show the outline of protected woodland. We made it red because of there's so many TPOs around the area. I want to be clear that this TPO protected fixed crops to short, so it was basically to show where it would clearly what it showed, and therefore by doing that we only have to clearly show what the TPO protects, and therefore the TPO map met to the requirements and was sufficient to show the objective location of protected woodlands. The Forestry Act we talked about, he said it wasn't necessary because of the Forestry Act will stop felling. His actual words, any tree officer from forestry would never get permission to fell trees in that woodland. Well, that's the material. Though the trees might be protected under the 1967 Act, the Forestry Act, it still gives you felling of 5 cubic metres of wood per quarter calendar. So that means within a year you could take out 20 trees, 24 trees out of that woodland without permission from the Forestry Commission, or else if it wasn't protected by the TPO. So there are ways around the Forestry Act, if you know the Act. So the TPO will protect the trees, the Forestry Act will not protect the trees fully. So under the virtue of the Plan Act, the forest can make as many tree preservations as it's expedient to do so for protection of the trees. If the trees are under threat, then the Plan Act gives the local authority rights to protect the trees, and especially if it's under threat and there's a negative impact on the health of the trees. The conservation area thing is about, there was a clerical error on the TPO template that went out. It said protect the trees within the conservation area, but it's been amended now, so it just says fixed trees are of value. So that still does not take away the importance of the TPO and its powers to protect the trees. So a recommendation is that the TPO is confirmed, but with a new continuous black line to show the protected woodland, because we now know that the owner now knows the area of the woodlands protected because he's objected to the TPO. So he's made it clear to him that is the woodland that is protected by this TPO. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Andy. And then we have members of the public who wish to speak. First of all, Parish Council. Is it Councillor Byrne or Councillor Upton? Councillor Byrne. So you have 3 minutes, Councillor Byrne, when you're ready, and the clock will come on screen.
When she starts, yeah.
It's there. Sample, there it is. So when you start speaking, then that will count down. And I'll have to stop you at the end of 3 minutes, I'm afraid. So over to you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. My name is Francesca Byrne, and I'm a councillor from Sheffield Parish. I'm speaking today on behalf of our Parish Council to support the British Council confirmation of TPO 22 regarding fixed costs. also known as Sheffield Wood. This ancient woodland has been designated a site for its for nature conservation, known simply as SINC. It's Class A1. This refers to woodlands which have developed particular ecological characteristics as a result of their long continuity. Biggs Copse is attached to the garden of the older residential property known as Red House. The copse is also to the rear of Longcroft and a short distance from other residential homes, many of which are Grade 2 listed, closest being A-lanes. The copse to the west has a direct boundary with Sheffield Equestrian Centre. The purpose of the SINC is to safeguard a site. It raises awareness of its importance for wildlife and encourages responsible and appropriate land management. There are other SINCs in Sheffield Village, Sheffield Church Meadows and Sheffield Common, and these are close to Biggs Copse. We consider that Biggs Copse has a high amenity value for those living within the parish and passing through. We consulted residents whilst drafting our village design statement, and 97% of the respondents agreed that open spaces, trees, hedges and open views contribute to the appearance and feel of the parish. A number of SINC sites are under parish management, and we work hard to protect wildlife and enhance their habitat. We understand a number of protected species live or visit Biggs Copse, to include badgers, bats and owls. Red House and Biggs Copse have until recently been under the stewardship of the family, who have respected and protected this ancient woodland for over 50 years. Our parish council had no concerns regarding its safety and management during their ownership. However, since new ownership in June 2020, we were made aware of builders with machinery within the copse. More recently, the owner allows horses and donkeys to enter woodland. This ancient woodland is important to Sheffield. Winchester City Council declared its own climate emergency and commits to becoming carbon neutral by 2024. Our parish council requests that you confirm the order today to safeguard the site for the future, thereby underpinning Winchester City Council's carbon neutral commitment. Should you be minded to confirm?
Could you come to the end of your thing?
Should you be minded to confirm, we would request that your council ensures that Biggs Copse is restored to its former condition and that regular monitoring of the site is conducted by your council.
Thank you very much. And then we have two supporters, Joe Harvey and Peter Miller, who's the Sheffield Village tree warden. And are you both speaking?
Yeah.
You have 3 minutes between you, so you sorted out an order, and at the end of 3 minutes, I'll have to stop you. You can, if you've used all the 3 minutes, Ms. Harvey.
Who should go first?
Up to you. It's up to you to sort out. But
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
so, could you put your microphone on? You're speaking first, are you, Mr. Miller? Yeah.
Yes.
Good morning. Sorry, can I, before you start, there was a presentation to show, so we can screen it, please.
Yep, that's fine.
Sorry.
The time goes back to front, unfortunately, when that happens.
In which case, it was a presentation to be shown.
In 2012, my family moved to Sheffield. Our garden bordered Biggs Copse, where I have easement rights to possess it. It was the abundance of wildlife that drew me there. I quickly became acquainted with the owners of the Red House, who kindly let me enjoy their wood. In springtime, the sea of bluebells were breathtaking, undisturbed and native. Sightings of the rare whiskered bat, tawny owls, woodpeckers, badgers, hedgehogs, and many nesting birds. In 2020, the Red House was sold, and it was evident that work was being carried out in the wood. A log cabin erected, sightings of diggers alongside donkeys which became resident, and for the first time I could see beyond Biggs Copse, through the trees, the vehicles, and people carrying out work. I've heard chainsaws, pneumatic drills, banging and grinding, and many unexplained sounds coming from the copse. Several horses were left inside, but were seen inside left to ring-bark trees. It's evident the wildlife has been disturbed as the natural sounds have lessened to be replaced by mechanical work of some sort. I'm deeply upset as my love of nature and wildlife has brought me here today to try and preserve the woodland and reverse the devastation potentially being caused to this once beautiful and undisturbed ancient woodland, which is full of our history and should only be treasured and protected.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I'm Peter Miller, I'm the Sheffield Tree Warden, and I'm also speaking on behalf of the village. Biggs Copse has been important in our village, and a lot of it you've heard about. Joe has described to you the spectacular display that is every spring and summer of primroses, followed by wood anemones, bluebells and lily of the valley. The real stuff of an English woodland. But this is at risk, and Ivan has shown you exactly what that risk is and what is happening to it. The copse has always been an amenity in the village, and whether it was Mr. Biggs fueling his smithy, which is close to that woodland, or whether it was the villagers enjoying the wood courtesy of the previous family that owned Red House. Their good management of the copse was recognised by Hampshire Biodiversity Information Centre designating the sink in 2012. Natural England has designated it as a site for environmental opportunity within the government's plan for biodiversity 2020. So all of these bodies and all of us that live in the village, particularly those living adjacent to the copse, are clear that this ancient woodland requires protection. We all therefore completely support confirmation of TPO 2298.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I forgot when, after Councillor Burns spoke, that there might be questions for you. So if anyone has any questions for any of the three public speakers, now would be the moment. But there aren't any. No. Thank you very much for coming along today. Going back to the report, any questions for Ivan on any of the three? Councillor Reid.
Ivan, I noticed that from the pictures taken, this has taken somewhere in the region of 10 months to get to this particular state. What would be the situation with regarding to renewing the land, i.e. the removal of anything that's been put there?
At the moment, we do have enforcement action going on to remove the horse manure by hands, not mechanical roots, there's no damage to the tree roots. So yeah, this has gone on for 10 months because obviously the chain events has happened. We served TPO previously to this one, and the trial they claimed they didn't get it, so we had to reserve another one. So, so that's what's gone, that's what's taken so long through. But the Environment Agency are aware of the situation. We're aware that there's a solar enforcement team itself working on this to get the situation rectified. But obviously, we need this TPO confirmed to progress forward, because once it expires, the trees are not protected and they probably can't take it.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Ivan, in Elizabethan times, there's the Naval Supplies Act passed, as I recall, to protect oak, particularly within the area of Portsmouth and Southampton Water. Would that act still apply to this woodland? Because I presume that the age you quoted is part of the old forest and beer.
Not as I know of that. I'm not familiar with that act would go that far, not that far. But really, the only way to protect this woodland is this TPO. It actually cements it properly. so that is protected.
Do you think that will be strong enough? As on the damage to the undergrowth by horses to
Yes.
that extent? I mean, you talk about protecting the actual trees. Woodland is at this age is a great deal more than just the trees.
Yes, that's right. The TPO protects the trees. You can't put a TPO on the woodland plants or the new trees that are coming up through, but you can preserve that environment for that to happen. But again, we're making sure that trees aren't felled or removed, so the woodland stays as its entirety as a cohesive group. So they all grow together and it does its natural process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You might not be able to answer this, but it might be for Mrs. Pinnock. Does any of this require planning permission, the large log cabin and the trenching work? Yeah.
Yes, the log cabin was last year the subject of a stop notice and an enforcement notice. The enforcement notice is actually in effect, but there was a time period given for the removal of the log cabin, and that time hasn't yet been reached. So the landowner just had a period of time before we can remove that. I think we gave a bit longer to allow for some investing and ecological reasons, because obviously if we're going to carry out further works, we don't want to do it at inappropriate times of the year. So at some point that happened, we have to be removed.
Simon, is any owner liable for any prosecution should this TPO be renewed? Has he sort of breached any?
Chair, may I just interrupt there? I rather we didn't get into discussion about any cases or any prosecution. Thank you.
Because it's a separate issue. Okay. Councillor,
as you quite correctly stated, with the horses going through the woods, would TPO have an effect on that? In effect, stopping the horses being allowed to grow in that area?
Yes, the horses are damaging the tree roots, so therefore that is a breach of the TPO. So the TPO covers the roots of the tree and the other parts of the tree, all parts of the tree.
I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask this question, but would the renewal of the TPOs stop horses and horse manure being tipped there? Or am I not allowed to answer?
Chair, sure, it's certainly right if you ask general questions. I just think it's probably better not to get into the specifics. Thank you. I'm sure I can answer that question.
Yes. The placing of the manure and the compaction in the horses are damaging the woodland floor. So the tree roots are in the woodland floor. So therefore you're damaging protected trees. The raising of the soil by manure will create heat as it decomposes. Heat will then generate, which then will cause fungal growth. It will also could cap the top over so that we can't get gases exchanges. It will alter the nutrient content of the soil. As I said, the Environment Agency are aware of the manure situation, but from the council's point of view, we have to protect the tree roots from disturbance. Now, the horses turning the ground up obviously exposes the tree roots. The tree roots extend 3 or 4 times the size of the canopy out, so the hairs on your head so fine, and they're only sort of in the top couple of inches of the soil because they're feeder roots. So by disturbing or killing them roots off, disturbing the roots, exposing them to air, will then have a detrimental effect on the health of the trees. And over a long period of time, that will then affect the woodland as a whole.
Thank you. Any further questions on the report? So the recommendation is to renew this TPO with an amended outline.
Is to confirm the TPO with a modification to them.
Right. So any debate? Councillor Bentot and then Councillor Nielsen.
I don't know if I should have declared an interest as ward councillor, but obviously I do know this site very well, and we're very grateful for Ivan getting in there and taking some action to prevent the destruction of this larger than Big Scott site. There are many things going on in that site, which the City Council and others are looking into, and any action that we can do to try to preserve and enhance the site there for the village is very important. So this action of a TPO is essential, and let's hope there's more action on other aspects so that we can protect that area for an amenity.
Councillor, I think you're allowed to speak as well, councillor, as long as you hadn't made your mind up before coming to committee and you had listened to the evidence. Councillor Pearson?
Yes, I do. Just say, I can't support this. What? Sorry, that's coming out of my way. I support this in every aspect, not only from its historical point of view. There are very few woodlands of this age that are the remains of the Forest of Beer, which Sheffield is pretty well the centre of where the Forest of Beer was. Clearly, they're also going to damage the roots because there's nothing else for them to eat, and they're after something that is edible. Lucky that the trees, the bark of the trees, has also impacted. Possibly has. You've just not mentioned that.
No, the bark's noted. The bark was fine.
I mean, we know from a biodiversity point of view how valuable trees are. Just a single tree, incredibly valuable, but a woodland of this age, with mixed number of trees, open beech particularly, but also what was remained of the other burden as well. You can't express it as being more valuable than this, not just for Sheffield, but I think for the whole of the district and what we're trying to do regarding biodiversity. So yes, please, if you can have 2 votes, give me them, because I will give them for this TPO to be preserved and strengthened if possible.
Any further debate? I'm just quite shocked by what Ivan had to tell us today. I'm saddened that anyone should treat such a valuable ancient woodland in this way. I don't want to stray into enforcement matters, but I have no hesitation in supporting the confirmation of the tree preservation order, which takes us then to the vote. The tree preservation order 2298. This is to confirm the order. All those in favour?
That's 9, Chair, unanimous for confirmation.
So that tree preservation order is confirmed. That concludes the morning business. Thank you very much, everybody.